For sticking to your time also, sir. Thank you very much for that. Now, our third speaker is Dr. Rabia Akhtar. She is a Director, Center for Security, Strategy and Policy Research, University of Lahore. She is also Director, School of Integrated Social Sciences at the same university. She holds a PhD in Security Studies from Kansas University and did a Master's in International Relations from Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad, and Master's in Political Science from Eastern Illinois University, USA. She has written extensively on South Asian nuclear security and deterrence dynamics. She is the author of the book titled The Blind Eye, US Non-Proliferation Policy Towards Pakistan and From Ford to Clinton. It's a fascinating historical account of Pakistan's nuclear program. It's a must read also. Dr. Akhtar is also the editor of Pakistan Politico, Pakistan's first strategic and foreign affairs magazine. She is also a member of Prime Minister's Advisory Council on Foreign Affairs. Dr. Akhtar is a non-resident senior fellow at the South Asia Center, Atlantic Council, Washington, D.C. Dr. Akhtar, over to you. Can you unmute your mic, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adil, for the invitation to join this esteemed panel. And, it's a great pleasure to be here. Also, I would like to thank President Kass for holding this, session on a very important subject. I will start with what bothers me, and it's the term the new normal, which is flaunted around. I'll state at the outset that I do not believe in this term. And to me, everything that is happening now is a continuation of events that have manifested in previous decades. So to me, there are no transitions, no clear-cut breaks. There was no post-Second World War world, there was no post-Cold War world, there will be no post-COVID world, and there is no new normal. It has become sort of fashionable to talk about Pakistan as if it is an abnormal state, and somehow everything related to Pakistan needs to be normalized. Toby would know, and he's said that normal is a loaded term because he wrote this book about Pakistan and normal nuclear Pakistan. There have been others who have written about it. Just like that, Indian abortive surgical strikes are to somehow magically create a new normal where India has found space to punish Pakistan. I don't believe in that. What we have at our hands is India experimenting, and we all can see how that is going. So there you have it. All I see is gradual dilution of the grand Indian strategic restraint, pushing the limits to challenge Pakistan's red lines and provoke a response. The phantom surgical strikes post-Uri, the Balakot strikes earlier last year, and provocations about gaining jurisdiction over AJK as per the recent statements made by the defense minister and later the Minister of External Affairs are all indicators of India finally shedding its strategic pacifism. It is also increasingly becoming a revisionist state, finally shedding the impressions of a status quo power. So there I have my piece about the new normal. Coming to the questions that you've posed, does warmongering and hostile rhetoric make any sense in the current peculiar pandemic environment? It is such an innocent question, Nader. Kashmiris are still under brutal detention and duress after more than 288 days today in IOJK. Has the pandemic brought any relief in the curfew? Has the pandemic made the Indian government think about lifting the curfew to provide humanitarian relief to the Kashmiris? The answer is a resounding no. Then why do we even think that warmongering and hostile rhetoric should be dished by the Indian government just because we are gripped by the pandemic, irrespective of how unprecedented it is? Line of control has been on fire since August 5th and will continue to be so in the unforeseeable future. Consider this. We are still at some considerable distance from each other across the line of control. The pandemic didn't even stop the Indians from entering into a fist fight and not sicking with the Chinese border patrol team. COVID-19, social distancing, hello, stay on your side of the border. Nothing of that sort when militaries are concerned. Does the diversionary thesis of war apply here, even as the world is facing this pandemic? Yes. As of today, there have been more than 3,000 deaths from COVID-19 in India. But did it stop their former army chief and union minister VK Singh from making that statement that India's plan to take GB is ready? No, it did not. It is not too far-fetched a thought that while Pakistan is dealing with COVID-19 crisis, India might consider mimicking what China did to India in 1962. destroy Pakistan's post across the line of control. I don't think they have a plan to take GB or AGK all at once. They might have a plan of destroying Pakistan's post across the line of control, capture some part of its territory across the line of control, and then do a unilateral ceasefire just short of Pakistan exploring its retaliatory options. What would Pakistan settle with giving up those posts, or would it escalate and not settle with India seizing its territory across the line of control? The fear of escalation at the line of control is real, pandemic or no pandemic. Literature on Indo-Pak limited war options, and every game or simulation exercise you, I, or everybody else in this forum has attended would tell you that limited war might not remain limited. Pandemic or no pandemic again. Pakistan needs to be ready and not think even for a split second that India will spare Pakistan just because it believes Pakistan needs to direct all its energies towards dealing with the pandemic. That would be foolish. Coming on to your second question about the rising influence of Hindutva at the senior decision-making level, and is there any space for dialogue under this environment between India and Pakistan? The Hindutva ideology to me is exclusionary in its approach and discriminatory in nature. It aims to restore Hindu pride, projects Hindu nationalism, and is fascist in spirit. On behalf of the entire Indian nation, RSS, driven by the Hindutva ideology, gets to decide who belongs in India and who does not. So to answer your question, in view of the rising influence of Hindutva at the senior decision-making level, is there any space for dialogue? No, I do not see any space. And not because Pakistan does not want to talk, but because they don't think it worthy of their time to engage Pakistan. They are done talking to Pakistan. They don't want to engage. They want Pakistan to accept the decision of August 5th. They want Pakistan to internalize this change of status that has been unconstitutionally, illegally imposed on the people of Jammu and Kashmir, whereby the already occupied territory was annexed on August 5th to make part of Indian Union territory. They don't want to talk to you. They have acted on their manifesto. They have done what they said that they will do. And do you think that they will give Pakistan the time or day to talk, and talk about what? To them, Kashmir issue has been resolved. If now you seek talks, it means that you have accepted the current status quo of Jammu and Kashmir, because from here onwards, only this could be the new barometer. Is that acceptable to Pakistan? That is the question. Coming to your last question, with India's claims of surgical strikes being the new normal, Pakistan's policy of quid pro quo plus, what would be the nature of potential future crisis? And your second part of it, will surgical strike change the domestic Indian reality? Adil, I see QPQ, I'll call it QPQ plus, as a manifestation of Pakistan's full spectrum deterrence. QPQ plus does and will not imply that Pakistan would escalate disproportionately. The burden of escalation will remain on India, and I believe so. The pattern will be determined by the targets and territories that India opts to engage with military force upfront in the crisis. Now, having said that, the window for conventional conflict at operational and tactical levels will always exist, and India will continue to exploit it to achieve its doctrinal objectives. The preparation of Pakistan military at operational and tactical levels will thus determine how quickly this window is shut and strategic deterrence remains intact. In a crisis, previous statements by Indian leaders about NFU, AGK, GB, all are going to play on the minds of Pakistani decision makers. But I'm a bit optimistic here. In the next crisis between India and Pakistan, how both states will be able to effectively and strategically manipulate the risk of nuclear war by arranging threats and exhibiting greater levels of resolve will clearly determine the outcome of the crisis. And given the high stakes and the commitment traps involved, it may not be difficult to manipulate those risks of nuclear dangers. To quote Robert Jarvis, even a slight chance that a provocation could lead to a nuclear war is sufficient to deter all but the most highly motivated adversaries. Moreover, the balance of resolve, I believe, induces caution in the sense that each side believes that if restraint is not matched by restraint, the other side has no reason to maintain such a policy. So while there are concerns that both India and Pakistan can feel confident in playing rounds of escalation safely, the fear that either side may escalate is a deterrent in itself for any further escalation. As for your last part, which deals with whether Indian domestic reality will change post Balakot 2.0 or 3.0, let me say that it will not. India needs to understand that the nature of insurgency in Kashmir has changed since the time it began. And in order for that to happen, one would need to know the difference between the symbolic Kashmir and the strategic Kashmir. From the 1990s onward until the death of Burhan Wani in 2016, the symbolic Kashmir and the strategic Kashmir remained two separate entities. And as P.R. Chari et al. Wrote, the symbolic Kashmir is a place where larger national, subnational identities are ranked against each other. The conflict in this Kashmir is as much a clash between identities, imagination, and history as it is a conflict over territory, resources, and people. And in the strategic Kashmir, the military establishments on both sides of the border insist that Kashmir is critical to the physical defense of their respective countries. Death of Burhan Wani, to me, blurred the lines between the two Kashmirs. Born during the height of the insurgency in 1994, Wani was instrumental in turning a fading quest for independence into a Kashmiri intifada through the use of modern means of communication. And his death, to me, catapulted the resistance to another level, one that is dynamic, strong, and indigenous. Even Pakistan, and please listen to this carefully, even Pakistan perhaps is not yet cognizant of this transformation taking place, that in years to come, this indigenized struggle, which feeds on the hatred of all things Indian, fueled by the current RSS, BJP, Hindutva nexus, will not require Pakistan's support, material or moral. The symbolic and strategic Kashmir are heading for a clash, which will shape Indo-Pak nuclear rivalry if these dynamics are not understood. So will Indian domestic reality change with another crisis with Pakistan? No. Why? Remember that this generation is in for a rude awakening, and it is coming whether anyone likes it or not, whereby sab yaad rakha jayega, sab yaad rakha jayega. So I'll end here and looking forward to the Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Rabia. As always, very fascinating points that you made. Now we move to discussion session, but just again, some administrative